Businesses tend to focus on revenue, profits, and getting loyal customers. But how about healthy workplace culture? You're listening to How I Turned the Corner, where Kendra Prospero leads eye-opening conversations that most business leaders avoid. The right way to address employee challenges. Listen to real-life stories of workplace struggles, giving you valuable advice on what must be done to make every employee truly satisfied and fulfilled in their job. This is for leaders who want to create great company cultures and for employees who want to do something to put an end to suffering at work in the most practical ways possible. Here's your host, Kendra.
When you walk through a store like Target or Sam's Club, how often do you wonder what it took to make that product you're about to buy? Do you ever wonder who is benefiting from the, say, $14.99 that you're about to spend? I believe that this is the future of the conscious consumer and of the conscious employee. And I am so excited to have you hear from our guest today about how he's created a company whose mission statement is, we exist to give generously, and where not only do they 10% of their profits go to charity, but they also every day are creating value. Mike Beckham is the CEO and co-founder of basically a consumer products company called Simple Modern. I feel almost disingenuous or wrong to say that what they do is they make really neat aluminum drinkware, because what they do with the money is what's so amazing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Mike has a philosophy of generosity. He believes that his employees, the people who consume his products, as well as the charities they donate to, all of these entities are part of the chain, and everyone deserves generosity. Generosity also goes beyond money. It's their time and even more with what they do with their employees. They create an environment where people feel appreciated, which appreciation and affirmation is free. And that's what their culture is like. Now, Mike is also a serial entrepreneur who has collectively, with all the businesses he's run over the years, generated over $1 billion in revenue. So we're also going to see how he's done this while also making money. I feel so lucky to chat with him about how he thinks about his employees and how he turned the corner and what he does now for his employees to create that environment where they feel appreciated and cared for. Mike Beckham, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Hi, Kendra. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us more about your background. Like, where did you begin as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so, I don't think any entrepreneur has a quote unquote typical story, but mine's, very atypical for sure. I went to school as a finance major and had a pretty, major amount of life change in college. I think a lot of people do, where I was kind of wrestling with the bigger questions of what do I want to be doing, with my life, with my career. Met my wife, and we got married actually the weekend after I graduated from college. And originally I'd thought about doing a couple different things, going and getting a PhD so I could teach, or maybe going into the business world and into the marketplace with finance. And through an unexpected series of events, I said yes to a 1-year internship with a nonprofit ministry group. And part of the reason was my wife had another year of her master's degree that she was going to be finishing up at OU, where we had gone to school. And so I thought, hey, this will allow me to stay close to campus. We'll be newlyweds. This will be great. And I really thought after a year of that I'd be going and doing something in finance. And what ended up happening was 1 year turned into 2, turned into 10. So I really spent my entire 20s working on people and developing people and, pouring into people. And not a lot of time, working on spreadsheets and business. And it was, I would say, a transformational experience for me. I think one of the things I was caught off guard by is how much I enjoyed it and how I really felt like it drew out some of the parts of me that I liked the most. And so by the time I got to 30, it was like, well, I guess I'm not going to do anything in the business world. And I think that's fine. I think I'm comfortable in my own skin. And right around that time, a series of events led to me helping my brother start a company that did about 6 months in, it just took off, and did way better than anybody could have ever guessed. I was helping on kind of a part-time basis with this company In 13 months, it went from founding to like $1 million in daily revenue. Wow. I was the oldest person associated with the company. I was not full time. I was 30. I mean, it was just crazy. It was kind of like almost like a Hollywood, kind of movie, the whole situation. And so I'm working really 2 full-time jobs in the nonprofit world, and then this for-profit company that's going crazy. And then we got pregnant with our first child, my son Carter, and just realized, okay, I can't be excellent at all of these things simultaneously. I need to make some choices. And that's when my wife and I, after a series of months, decided, hey, it seems like the path is for me to go full-time into the business world. And so for a few years, I was kind of an entrepreneur with my brother, and we started a series of businesses. Some of them were amazing, some of them weren't, but learned a ton. And then by about 2015, I really felt like I either wanted to go back into the nonprofit world, or I probably wanted to start another business where I was leading it and I was setting culture. And a couple of guys that I had worked with approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in starting something with us on the side? And I thought, sure. I didn't think it was going to be some big organization. It just seemed like these are great people that I'd love to do a project with. And that was the really humble beginnings of Simple Modern. And so, if you look at the kind of the arc of my career, there was certainly, if you said, hey, at 43, 42, you want to be the CEO of a company that's at significant scale, what's the path you should take as a 22-year-old? No one would have ever told you to take the path that I took. And yet, I think that's been part of the secret recipe for me of why it's worked, because I really spent, I would say, the first 8 or 9 years after college understanding myself, understanding what I felt like was important, understanding other people, how to, develop, pour into, care for other people. And that foundation actually translated exceptionally well to entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. We can really overestimate the tactics and the strategy side of business and underestimate how much of it is just cooperating and working with other people. Absolutely. Motivating, organizing, leading other people. And that's really what business is at its core. So when you learn to care for other people well and develop other people and lead other people, the strategy stuff and the tactics stuff, that stuff is a lot easier to pick up than the other way around. And, you'll hear people say this all the time, that I thought I was starting a business to work on business problems. And what I really was doing was I was starting a business to work on people problems all the time, because it really is that so much of running a company isn't like, okay, hey, what does our price need to be here? What does our go-to-market strategy need to be over here? But can you build a team of people that are really pulling together in the same direction and are motivated by a common vision? And so that's kind of my story. It came from the nonprofit world, and feel like I was a little bit thrust into the for-profit world. And even today, sometimes I'll tell people that I feel a little bit like a nonprofit refugee in a for-profit world. Yeah. There are certainly times where I will communicate thought processes that will get me weird looks in the room. But I kind of wear that as a badge of honor, that I do think, I try to think differently about what it looks like to lead this company and what a for-profit company can look like. And I think it's been one of our kind of secrets to recruiting and retaining an exceptional team, is that there's a real hunger and appetite out there for organizations that are thinking a lot more holistically than just how do we make money. How do we positively impact our community and impact the lives of the people in the business and our customers, and and all these other things in the process. So that's a little bit of how I got to here.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So when you were in the nonprofit world, I mean, how would you have described yourself as a leader in those days? Like, what if I have a philosophy that if I'm not embarrassed by who I was last year or 10 years ago, then I'm not growing. And so when you think back into those early days of your leadership life? Like, what were you like as a leader, and how have you changed?
Well, my first leadership experience, I had a lot of leadership experiences at the end of high school and into college. I mean, I think one of the first really formative ones for me was I was the president of my fraternity. And that is a difficult leadership position because, especially if you're trying to lead with some kind of integrity in that world, then there's always people angry with you, because they just kind of want to do what they want to do. And I think that leadership experience taught me that you can't lead people very well if you're constantly at the mercy of wanting to be liked by everybody. And it's interesting, like sometimes people I think can lean on that as a crutch of like, oh, it doesn't matter what people think about me, who cares? And what they really mean by that is I'm not receptive to feedback and valid feedback where I need to get better. But I think there is a reality that just anytime you step into leadership, there are going to be people that are going to disagree with the way you lead. And so one of the first kind of fundamental steps as a leader is having enough conviction in what you stand for that you're okay with people disagreeing with that. Because you can't really cast any kind of a compelling vision unless it's in some ways different from what most people are doing or like the general kind of consensus of society. I think being in the nonprofit world, a couple of things that have really impacted my leadership style. I mean, I think one is that leadership as service is a concept I took really strongly from my time there. That there's this great kind of analogy that Jesus gives in the Bible that like the world thinks like a triangle, and that you start at the bottom of the pyramid or the triangle and you try and work your way up, so that when you get to the top of the pyramid, that everybody that's below you kind of serves you, and that you're kind of trying to climb the ladder, and that's the way that most of the world thinks. But that there's an alternative way to think about it, which is an upside down pyramid, where it's like the leader actually is the person that serves the most people and has the most responsibility on their shoulders. And it's the exact inversion. And I think that I really take that seriously. I view my role as the organization expands. My role is I feel more responsibility, and I feel like I have more families and more people that are looking to me to lead with integrity and to make good decisions. And I feel that responsibility, I think, in a good way. I think another thing is that being in the nonprofit world helped me to align my internal compass of like what matters. And I think everybody's got to kind of, it's just very difficult to be an effective leader if you don't have a compelling vision of like what life is about and what your purpose is. And when you have that, people are naturally attracted to that and gravitate towards that. But you can't impart what you don't possess. And so for me, it was this kind of cultivating period where I think I really solidified, hey, this is what matters in life, relationships, like people. Here's things that don't matter, how much stuff I have, other sort of stuff. And that when I then went into leading in a business context, although it's a little bit different, a lot of those principles set me up to be a much more effective leader. The other thing that I think this is a little bit more of a skill that I developed, but so much of leading in business is sales. Even organizationally, leadership is about selling other people on, and persuading other people towards a vision. And so, working in the ministry world and the nonprofit world, it is a lot about kind of casting a vision for something and persuading people. And I would never have guessed how much that translates to like, oh, that same skill set can help you to be really effective when you're explaining to Walmart or Target why they want to carry your product, or when you're talking to a potential team member about why joining your team is the best decision for them and their family, or something like that. So those were some of the takeaways. I mean, it's probably a much longer list. And ironically, I think I'd specifically call out becoming pretty dispassionate about money was a big milestone for me, and has helped me to be a much better business person. Ironically, like the way to run the most profitable business, the way to run a very profitable business is actually, I don't think, first and foremost, being all consumed, focused on profit, which that's a counterintuitive take, right, for sure. But so for me to be able to step into a company where like I really view it as I'm not trying to run this company to get resources so I can go buy things, because I think that'll make me happy, because I don't. And because I have that perspective, I'm able to, in a lot of ways, be just a lot more objective and about the resources that the company has and what are the best ways to invest them. How do we think about things like compensation? How do we think about things like giving as a company? And we're able to make better decisions because I don't have, and I think this is true not just of me, but the type of people that the company recruits, where the goal is not just like, how do I get as much out of this piggy bank as I can for myself so I can go and spend it on these things over here. So anyway, several of these are pretty countercultural ideas, but they've also been really attractive to people that are looking for something different. And I think this is really, from what you've told me, kind of the heart of your podcast is this view of there is a better way, to structure things. And there's a better way to think about our relationship with work and the cultures that we work in. And I think the performance of our company hopefully is a testimony to that.
Mm-hmm, for sure. It's many of the founders that I speak to and coach primarily, not so many of them on this podcast, but they have more of this mindset of almost an us versus them with their employees. So aside from what you've said already, like what would be other sources to kind of get them out of that mindset? I mean, you're clearly profitable. So we could say that from one angle, like you can do both. You can be about your employees and be profitable. What else though? I mean, what are other things other than I think for you and I, it's just the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that business is naturally pretty transactional. And I don't know that you can ever fully extract that element from business, but I think maybe the antonym of that is relational. The more that we can lean towards relational as opposed to transactional in the way that we think about business, the more effective we will be at not having us first them mentalities and not viewing things as zero sum, where, for me to win, my employees or that other competitor has to lose. And so I think that it's very, for my view of the company is that a lot of what I get compensated from the company is actually not the financial stuff. It's the quality of life I get from working at the company. Like one of the things that I talk with people a lot about is that what everybody's really after is quality of life. They might not use those words, but that's what they really want.
Yeah.
And so the reason why we tend to gravitate towards money is just because it seems like, well, if I had enough money, I feel like I could find a way to convert that into quality of life. And the reality is you can sometimes to some extent, but the conversion rate's not as good as you think it is. Mm-mm. And that even if you have a bunch of money, if other things aren't present, you can't convert it into quality of life. Like what really leads to quality of life is that you feel like you're learning and growing. You feel like you're entrusted and empowered to do your job. You feel like you're surrounded by people that you are connected with relationally and that you matter to them and they matter to you, that you're working on something that has a positive impact on the larger world around you, and there's a number of these things. I mean, this isn't me saying this is research has proven that this is true about us. And so the way that I've kind of approached the company is that we're trying to create an environment where all of those things are true. And certainly, like if the company does well, like everybody should financially be able to benefit with the company. But if that's the only way that I am creating quality of life for the people that work here, then I'm actually not doing a very good job of creating a compelling culture to be a part of. And so when you take this more kind of holistic approach towards quality of life, I think what you do is you create an environment where you realize like, hey, for all of us to get what we want and to get the quality of life, we've got to be together. We've got to be bonded together and moving towards the same goal and treating each other in a certain way and challenging each other in certain ways. And so, it's interesting because like you said, I think I I don't ever feel that kind of us versus them mentality. If anything, I think I can feel it sometimes, I can feel it about kind of my company versus like the, outside forces where it's like, hey, I need to stand up for these people. And, when we're having a discussion, with an outside partner and they're trying to, ask for something unfair of the company, like, then yeah, I am willing to go to bat for the company, not just for myself, but for everybody that I represent. But it's a pretty unhealthy culture when you start to feel like you are at odds with the people that you're working with. And I think that, it should lead to questions like, hey, what needs to change on the team where that's not the case? Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't claim, Kendra, to be an expert on how do you fix all these things when they start to go off the rails. But I think I've become at least decently versed in when it's going right, what does it look like? It's not a nice little wrap a bow on it answer, but in general, like my view is there's no way I can get out of life what I want without having a great team around me. Mm-hmm. And that hopefully what you do is you get into a situation where as you serve and you lay down, your rights for the people around you, they do the same thing and everybody kind of flourishes. But it takes a tremendous amount of trust for that to happen. And, low trust environments are pretty toxic for us and our quality of life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've had always a tiny, like an existential crisis I have with profit, in terms of like, what does it do really for business when it's not me who's making this business happen, it's this whole team. It's like every time we have profitability aside from just the savings account, of course I want to give it away, give it back to my employees. And I think you have that same philosophy and you've even gone beyond that. And so, you have incredibly generous contributions that you make. Do you want to share a little bit of what you guys do, both for your employees as well as for charities?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is that at a company level, we've just said, hey, we're going to give 10% at least of our profit every year away. Last year it was a little over $1 million. We're hopeful that can grow into several $1 million a year over the next couple of years. And we kind of divide that into two ways. We have like kind of corporate giving. We have what we call like a giving summit. We have a whole bunch of nonprofits come in and present, here's what we're working on. And then the team kind of votes. And then we have kind of a committee, this giving committee, and they make allocations. And so we'll allocate about 70% of our giving that way. And then about 30% of our giving, every single employee gets an equal share of that 30% and is able to give it to an organization of their choice. Like really our only ask is don't pick something highly political. We're just trying to help people here and not draw attention, for our political beliefs or whatever. And so that's one of the ways that we do it. But, I think giving, we have as a value generosity. And one of the things that I talk about when I unpack this for the company or new hires is that we have this very kind of broad view and holistic view of generosity, where generosity, for sure, it should mean that you cut some checks, right? And if you're not putting your money behind it, then, is it really generosity? But if that's your only view of generosity, that's a pretty small view of generosity. There's so many different ways that we have an opportunity to be generous. So we define it as being open-handed with everything you've got. So for me, what does that look like? Well, obviously, like I've been entrusted with a pretty significant amount of resources, and it's being open-handed with that and being willing to give financially. But also, like, I've been really fortunate. I've gotten to lead some companies that have done really well. I've just been privileged to be in some of the situations that I've been in that I've learned a lot from. So what do I do with that knowledge? How can I be generous with that knowledge? A couple of the ways that looks like for me is I teach up at the University of Oklahoma. I teach entrepreneurship. I try to spend a significant amount of time within the company teaching and kind of mentoring. But everybody at our company has things that they can teach to their coworkers, and so we're constantly asking that question, like how can you be generous with the skills and the knowledge that you have? Another way we talk about generosity is just are we generous when it comes to affirmation, appreciation, recognition, right? It doesn't cost us anything. And yet it can be transformational to other people when we say, hey, I see you, I see this area that you've worked on, that you've grown so much. I see that thing that you did that was special. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. Like, that's a form of generosity. And a lot of times that's more powerful than money. Counterintuitive secrets I learned from being in the nonprofit world is much of the time the gap is not resources. That the gap is the right people to deploy those resources into. That, like, the reason why some of these issues that we've been fighting for decades haven't been eradicated isn't because there isn't a lot of money, more money than ever before, flowing into, these causes, but because the money alone can't fix anything. That money put in the hands of people, empowering the right people to go and to speak into people's lives and develop relationships and create structures. Like, that's actually what makes a difference. I think the way that I would just summarize it is, hey, everybody has the opportunity to lead in generosity in some area of their life. Doesn't matter how you're situated. You have the ability to do that. And the challenge is just, how can you personally lead in generosity? Not everybody can write like a 9-figure check, and that's okay. But with the way that you're situated today, what does it look like to lead in generosity? And so I try and challenge everybody at the company to do that. And I think the way that I try and challenge myself is, I need to not lean on my charitable giving as a crutch that says, hey, I've checked the box if I'm being generous, right? And it's easy, I think, for some people that are financially wealthy to do that, to say, hey, if I write X amount of checks, then I'm a generous person and I can kind of check that box. I think you can have a pretty non-generous attitude and still write big checks.
Right.
It's more like,
it's the easy.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's actually, it doesn't require very much of me emotionally to do that. Whereas, me really getting involved in somebody else's life and coaching them through a difficult period, or, taking the time to really teach someone else something that I've learned, without expecting anything in return, those things might actually be bigger asks. And so that's probably the main thing that I would say to anybody listening to this, is that generosity is a general open-handedness with everything you have in your life. That's your time, it's your talent, it's your money, it's your position, it's your experience, and how can you use those for the benefit of other people?
Mm-hmm. And how has this benefited you? Like, what is life like for you now? I mean, is it stressful? Do you feel like you have that quality of life? Like, I really work hard to work 35 to 40 hours a week. Like, I figure if I'm working more than that, I'm not enabling my team. Yeah. And so I really hold that I'm pretty protective of that. What about for you? Like, what does it do for you?
So I will say that I'm, it's funny. I was at a gathering of some very successful businessmen. And one of them was just like, Mike, you're like always the most relaxed person in the group. Like, what is good? How is this possible? And I said, well, guys, I have a heavy sedative in my water bottle. But the reality is that when you do the hard work of establishing a culture where these things are really true, and empowering other leaders, pouring into people, and, that it really does get quite a bit less stressful. And I don't experience a lot of stress on a day-to-day basis. There's certainly periods where I will, but in general, I think I'm abnormal in terms of how little stress. And, some of that is also, Kendra, like, I'm not holding on to the business too tightly. One of the concepts that I share with people is like, there's 100% chance that someday I won't work for Simple Modern. There's 100% chance that someday I won't have the shares anymore. Like, it is going away. It's just kind of a question of when. Now, it may be that the company goes out of existence in 5 years. It may be that I die and they go on to my kids or somebody else. But it's 100%. It will not be in my name in 50 years. Like, there's no doubt. The only question is, what is the process of the time that I'm in the company? What's that look like? And what does the process of how I exit look like? And that's it. Those are the only unknowns. And there's actually something like pretty freeing about that, because once you realize that, you can stop holding on to things so tightly, because you realize like, hey, inevitably this won't be something that I possess. And so I think that perspective helps my stress level, where it's like, I want to lead well. I want the company to do well. I want to be ambitious and to build something great. But, if the company were to go away, it would not destroy who I am as a person. And I think that kind of being able to live in that tension actually is incredibly healthy for doing great things. Because I think the more you get fearful, the harder it is to really perform at your best. And I think that fear tends to make us more zero sum. And some of the things you were talking about, kind of us versus them mentalities and some of this other stuff, like I think fear is at the root of a lot of those kind of negative behavior loops that we can get into. So for me, there's not a lot of day-to-day stress. The way that I think about work-life balance is interesting. I would not say that I'm like a hard and fast number of hours guy. It's funny. I was reading about historically in the United States, the number of hours that people worked in a week. We're only about 130 years away from like the average person worked 90 or 100 hours in a week. Because it's like, it's a farm and that's what you do, and that's how it goes.
Sunday off, that's it, right?
Right. And you know what? I'll be honest. I bet that a lot of those people were quite a bit happier than people are in our society. So I think that there is this kind of like desire to kind of find like, well, what's the magic number? And what I have found is it's really less about the number of hours I'm working, and it's more about are some principles being true. So some principles that keep my quality of life really high. Are my priorities in order? If I'm a better CEO than I am a father or a dad, then something's gone wrong.
Right.
Or even a friend. Now, that doesn't mean that every week I spend more time with my kids and my wife than I do at work. In fact, a lot of weeks that probably won't be the case. But it means in terms of priorities, that's being expressed in my daily, weekly, life, that that I understand what my priorities are, and that's expressed over time. There's weeks where I'll have like, okay, I've got a big sales meeting, and this is going to be a week where I probably work a good number of hours. What I try to be is I try to kind of take like a high intensity interval training kind of perspective, where it's like there's periods where I ramp way up on the work side or way up on the family side, and then I have to kind of cycle down the next week so I can cycle up on something else. So it's less about kind of total number of hours worked as are my priorities kind of in order with these cycles that I'm going through. And then I think the other principles that are really helpful for me, am I meaningfully connecting with people, both, in all the different spheres of my life, but, at work, at home, are meaningful relationships happening? Am I growing? Am I challenged? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I empowering others and equipping others to lead? Like, another word you could use for this is multiplying. So like every week, what my hope is that I'm multiplying myself, so that, there were a lot of things when we started the company. I was probably one of the best 2 or 3 people in the company at being able to do, this particular function or that particular function. The goal over time is that I'm coaching and I'm equipping and empowering other people, so that there's just this growing bench of capable leaders, and that I'm increasingly expendable in many areas of the business. And the more expendable I become in kind of the day-to-day operations of the business, the more I'm able to lean into coaching and empowering other people. And like you said, that leaves room for other leaders.
Yeah.
And it leaves room for me to go on, to pioneer in new areas of the business. So these are some of the things that I try and focus on that I think help keep my stress level down, and also keep my quality of, my level of satisfaction and quality of life really high.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mike. What a fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. And I will be on the lookout now for your products everywhere I go, and be very active in supporting you, because I love it. And I hope all of our listeners do that as well. So thank you again for your time today. And I will check back in with you in a couple months and just see how you're doing, and just kind of keep in touch with you. So Thank you for joining me today on How I Turn the Corner. And best of luck to you for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Kendra. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining this exciting episode. We hope this discussion brings you closer to a better, healthier, and more rewarding workplace everyone deserves to be a part of. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the podcast at turningthecornerllc.com/podcast. Don't forget to share this with your friends in the corporate world. And together, let's make this space a hub of growth and job satisfaction. If everyone loves where they are, they can always give their best without regrets. That's all for now. See you on the next one.